Okay, welcome everyone. Let's kick it off. So this month we focused on Fitwel for our design forecast feature. There we go. And to share about why we wanted to focus on Fitwel, we'll give you a brief overview. In doing the research for this feature, we learned, or maybe remembered, maybe we knew this before, but we in this country spend a ton of time indoors. And we know that inside, the concentration of these pollutants are often higher than outdoor concentrations. Sitting has been called the new smoking. We know physical inactivity is on the rise and is now comparative with smoking. And the workday is coming in at 8.1 hours a day. People are going back and forth between work, school, home, and essentially all of these spaces are indoor. And so as designers, we wanted to really learn and dive into what is behind designing these indoor spaces that can help them to work for our health instead of against it. And in this research, we have been aware of the Fitwel certification for a long time, and we wanted to do a deep dive into Fitwel. We sort of informally have been calling this feature like demystifying Fitwel, because we really wanted to learn what is behind this certification. A little bit of background on Fitwel for those who may not know, but it is this leading certification system, and it's really committed to building health specifically. It was created by the CDC and U.S. General Services Administration, and it's currently operated by the Center for Active Design. As we're diving into this feature as well, we know that this fitness and this wellness psychographic spans all demographic segments. If you've attended any of our webinars this year, we have a whole separate feature focused on fitness, one focused on wellness. We've done a ton of research into these topics and into this realm this year. So we know that this cohort is educated on the impacts that the indoor environments have on their well-being. Looking at some of Fitwel's statistics, they do support this. According to their data, the Fitwel certified buildings benefit from these faster lease-up times, higher tenant referral rates, more occupancy, and an overall increased ROI. So what we're really diving into this to learn is, as the creators of these interior environments and communities, we see it as our responsibility to ensure that the buildings that we are designing are having a positive impact on people's well-being. We wanted to explore Fitwel versus WELL. I'm sure many on this call are familiar with the WELL building standard. And so to sort of knock out any questions right in the beginning of this presentation, we will do a very, very brief touch on both and briefly the differences between the two. Both of these certifications do focus on creating spaces that positively impact the health and well-being of the building occupants, but there are many differentiators. The biggest between the two being the associated costs and the rigor of the documentation. WELL's documentation process is similar to LEED, so anyone who's been through that process knows that you typically need to hire an external consultant. The costs are much higher, and then of course the additional cost of the consultant. You must recertify every 3 years. And then, of course, because of this recertification, there are ongoing costs associated with this upkeep and recertification. Fitwel, however, does not require an external consultant to support with the documentation. The certification costs to start off with are much, much lower, and there's no recertification necessary. So again, this is a very brief touch on the differences, but just to sort of frame up and give us a reference to go forward with in this the rest of this presentation. And so Jen Zella, our principal, our director of design, our co-founder, she may be joining this call, or she may be here. If she is, she might pop in. But as we were really exploring the research for this presentation, I wanted to include this quote from Jen herself, and I will read it to us. She says, "The beauty of the Fitwel certification is that it holds us accountable as design, development, and operations partners to follow through and execute on decisions that prioritize occupant health. It's an accountability tool." So what we really found with this tool with Fitwel is that when we're signing up with a project to go for Fitwel in the beginning, like Jen says here, it does hold us accountable as partners to follow through and execute on these decisions that do prioritize well-being. And that accountability helps to carry that theme, that commitment to wellness through the completion of the project. To give us some quick stats, as we titled this page, on Fitwel and just general well-being, we'll share a few of these. We do have statistics that 83% of residents believe that living in a green apartment is good for their health. We know, of course, COVID has a huge impact on this mindset, and 71% of residents place an increased value on healthy building features in their apartment communities. Healthy homes have become more important to 54% of adults since 2020. And then a little bit of information on rents, looking at rents in office buildings that achieved well and or fit well were between 4.4 and 7.7% higher per square foot than non-certified buildings. And we may get into that just a little more later on. And then multifamily is one of the fastest growing asset classes that is receiving the Fitwel certification. And we're seeing this number of properties pursuing certification increasing 122% year over year. And we may have a little more to speak on that in a moment as well. To do the research for this presentation, we actually spoke with Zachary Flora. He is the VP of Market Growth at the Center for Active Design, which, as a reminder, they are the current operator of the Fitwel standard. And we wanted to ask him some of our most asked questions and really his most asked questions. We asked him, what are you hearing the most? What do people want to know the most? What are your most asked questions? So he boiled it down to these three. Number one being, does a Fitwel certified project get higher rent rates? And so his response to this is that they're actually seeing it go the other way around. They are seeing that projects that do not have a Fitwel certification are having to lower their rents. So that was an interesting perspective that he shared with us on that. Second question, asking if potential residents recognize the Fitwel brand. We really wanted to dial in with him to see if they see that Fitwel plaque, it's in the marketing materials, people are touring, they're looking to rent. What does that have any cachet? Does that have brand recognition? And how does that impact the potential renter? He let us know that Fitwel does not necessarily have name recognition. However, he said that the prospective renters don't need to know something is healthy in order to get the impacts. And he gave the example of if you're touring, if you're on the leasing path and you're taking a resident through, you're in a beautiful space that is sunlit, natural daylight, huge windows. The person on this tour is going to feel comfortable in that space, and they will know that they like that space. They'll know that they feel good in that space. They might not know the information behind it, that it's because there's natural daylight and that has X, Y, and Z scientific and health research behind it. So that was the answer that he gave, that when people are in these spaces that are built to this Fitwel standard, they feel better. They are getting the wellness benefits without knowing why and without needing to know why. So that was his answer to that. And then last question, what other ways does a Fitwel certification position a project for a positive ROI? He is saying that when they see that a project is going to sell, it's attractive to potential buyers to know that the building is being operated to and was built to the Fitwel standard. So this helps to lay some of the groundwork for our most frequently asked questions that Zachary receives in his position and that we really had to. So let's go forward. We wanted to explore a little bit the idea of this Fitwel consumer. We did speak earlier about especially Gen Z, but thinking about this consumer that is a little bit more educated on the idea of building health. They may not be familiar with the Fitwel brand or standards specifically, but they do know about indoor air pollutants. They know about the benefits of being in a healthy interior space. They may be familiar with terms like VOCs or things like that. They might not know what it all means, but there is in general awareness and a general education. So looking at what we have here, knowing that Gen Z is considered more pragmatic than other generations, they place value in integrating health and wellness into their day-to-day life. And that is what living in one of these Fitwel certified buildings is. You don't have to worry about making sure that you're checking off all these boxes of clean air, clean water, having exposure to daylight, having operable windows, taking the stairs. It is naturally part of the design of the building. And our role as designers, as operators, is to make sure that that fits seamlessly into the experience of living in one of these buildings where these people don't even have to think about it. And so Gen Z, knowing how pragmatic they are, they don't want to have to think about waking up, making sure they're doing the stairs instead of the elevator. They want it to be this natural progression through their day that they don't have to think about. It's integrated into their life, and that is how they approach wellness. 60% of Gen Z believe that the pandemic's single most important effect on society will be taking care of one's health. So we know that this is just an ongoing importance and priority for them. And then a few more details here is that they're looking to incorporate wellness seamlessly into daily life. They're taking this easeful approach to wellness. Kind of like I said before, they don't want to think about it. They want it to be planned into their day, into the path of their life, into their lifestyle, super integrated, super holistic, not something that they're thinking about and parceling out. And then they do have some knowledge of health and wellness. So there is this sense of some level of education on the effect of building health. Looking at Fitwel specifically here, we wanted to share the impact categories. So we'll share these briefly, but focusing on number one being community health, two, reduced morbidity and absenteeism. That may play a little bit more into Fitwel for more of like an office space, but still number two there. Three being social equity, four, feelings of well-being, five, access to healthy foods, six, occupant safety, and seven, physical activity. When we take it a step further, we'll look at the certification categories. And again, this is just to give a brief overview of the Fitwel process. Number one, location, access, outdoor space, entrances and ground floor, stairs, stairwells, interior environments, workspaces and dwellings, shared spaces, water supply, grocery stores, vending, and emergency procedures. So within each of these certification categories, there will be the details for how to design, plan, and operate the building to these standards within these categories. We wanted to take a little bit of a departure from specifically the Fitwel information and share a little bit about what we at CID want to highlight the most coming from these criteria. And so we're sharing here, if a certification is not part of your strategy, you can still use the criteria as a guidepost. And we at CID consider these categories to be the most critical and impactful. And this is where we focus, even if we're not designing a project going specifically for a certification, but we want to make sure that we are including those well amenities and designing for the building to support human health to as optimal a place as we can. So one here is water, two, air, and three, light. And then we'll go into a few of the strategies for designing into these categories that we believe are most impactful. Number one, just to highlight on clean water, we're sharing here that access to safe, clean water is a human right, looking to elevate this experience and sort of spin it into an amenity, focusing on this hyper-purified water, wanting to make sure we're focusing on the remineralization aspect as well, knowing that, especially looking at reverse osmosis purification, it removes these contaminants, but it also removes the minerals, so it's important to remineralize the water. And then offering this clean, purified water helps to reduce the reliance on bottled water. And we're wanting to make sure that we're always communicating these ideas and helping to continue the education of any of the building occupants and communities through some of the signage type ideas that we have shown here. A way to turn this sort of idea into an amenity is offering water at elevators. So considering installing these purified water bottle filling stations on every floor, perhaps at elevator banks, highlighting that this is truly an amenity, making it accessible, reducing reliance on bottled water. And then if we wanted to really step it up, kind of taking it a little bit to the next level, to really elevate this clean water as an amenity, offering it in the unit with an under-counter purification and remineralization system. Focusing next on clean air, looking at, we've talked a bit about this, but we know indoor air quality is a major player, and actually seeing a kind of an uptick in in consumers being aware of their air, thinking that there's a lot of these personal air quality monitors kind of popping up on the market, and thinking that this may be something that consumers are really trending towards tracking on their own over the next several years. There's air quality monitors that you can mount just on your wall, but there's also portable ones. So they integrate with all of the smart tracking wearables. So I think this will be an interesting trend to kind of track a little bit, but just consumers' awareness of the air quality. So for that reason, but also just because we believe that it's so important, we want to focus on this idea of clean air, knowing that VOCs, off-gassing, pollution, mold, and simply uncirculated air can lead to a decline in health. And so we, again, want to focus and communicate on this. We have another example of signage as well. One way to do this is through the needlepoint bipolar ionization, which is an air quality control cleaning sterilization method, and it actually generates this electronic charge, produces this concentration of positively and negatively charged ions circulating, and they search out the contaminants. And so this tech is being installed, and it can actually be installed on existing systems. So that's something to keep in mind. And then all of this information from this and knowing that your air is clean, again, can be communicated with this signage, because we know that air isn't something that you can see. You can't see if it's clean versus dirty, but thinking that the signage combined with the future kind of upswing in people's personal air quality monitoring could be pretty interesting. And then last, looking at light. So we know that it's essential to have the appropriate exposure to the full spectrum of light, and that stimulates our visual cortexes. Our moods are heavily influenced by the color, the angle of light, and it's a major player within space, which is something that we as designers all know. Actually, we as humans all know. This specific example, love this image. This is from Standard Dose, which is a wellness boutique in New York. And this skylight here is actually artificial, but it still uses this really cool technology to give those angles that change throughout the day of light as if it were a real skylight. So even these artificial lights or using some of this red light can still impact people in a positive way. But of course, natural daylight is also super essential, and incorporating this daylight into space helps us to connect with that primal self, connect with those cycles of the day, seasons, and year. Making sure that we are highlighting natural daylight in spaces. We know that this is something that people just immediately feel the benefits of. And then our last idea within this category of light is circadian rhythm. So circadian lighting is the concept that light can be used to support human health. And this helps, of course, ties in with some of that natural daylight, but there's also tools that can be used so the lights dim in the evening. They kind of mimic a sunrise in the morning. And we can use technology to help to support this idea as well as we design within space. We wanted to share some closing thoughts about the idea of WELL and sustainable certifications in general. So again, we do see this as this measure of accountability, that this foundation of what we're building and designing is fundamentally better for people. That is always what we're trying to design a space that helps people live to their fullest potential, helps them access their most optimal state of health. And so for this reason, Fitwel is so accessible, so affordable. There's no recertification process. It's so achievable, and it helps to hold that accountability through so that we know we are designing these spaces for optimal health. In the spirit of transparency, we do want to share that we say here in like a bit of a joking way, the best thing about Fitwel may also be the worst, air quotes, worst thing about Fitwel, just in the sense that there is no recertification process and maybe no future accountability to fully uphold. But the bottom line that we truly feel is that the positive intentions of the program and everyone who builds to this Fitwel standard and operates to this Fitwel standard completely outweigh the cons. And to wrap it up, it's accessible, it's affordable. We can hold ourselves accountable to truly creating these WELL spaces, and believe that when this program is built and upheld to the standard, we know that there are elements that will live on regardless of what happens in the future with operations. We wanted to share a few of these links, and we can drop these here in the chat, but a few links for further resources on, we're kind of calling them conscious design links. And then want to share too that we do have 4 Fitwel ambassadors on our CID team. And so if anyone on the call has more questions about the specifics of Fitwel, of the certification, of what goes into the certification categories or components, we have 4 amazing designers on our team who are fully certified Fitwel ambassadors and can help to walk through any of those resources or answer any of those further, more detailed questions. There is a lot of information out there available from Fitwel specifically on that goes into much further detail on, I'll just scroll back through here, on all of these impact categories and all of the certification categories. We did not want to duplicate that here since that is a resource that already exists, and we're happy to share that if anybody would like to request it after the presentation. All right, let me just leave us on this page here. So if anybody does have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A and we will be happy to get back to you after the call. I hope that this was helpful and helped to sort of demystify everything going on around Fitwel, around some of these well certifications. And we are